Hi there, you're listening to a podcast from the MS Trust, Multiple Sclerosis Breaking It Down. I'm Nick and I'm here with yourself.
Helena, and we're here at the MS Trust conference today.
Yeah, I know, it's been good, Helena, hasn't it? We've been filming lots of interviews with lots of experts and catching up with lots of people, so make sure you have a look out for those interviews as well on our YouTube channel.
And we would like to welcome you to our podcast, Multiple Sclerosis Breaking It Down. Last episode, we spoke about bladder problems. So quite kind of natural progression. We're moving on to something that's often linked to bladder problems, which is bowel issues in MS.
Yeah, that's right, Helena. And we've been catching up with lots of people, haven't we, here as well about, bowel issues. And our guests who will feature later on, we actually recorded it live at conference too. So it's one of those symptoms, isn't it, that's people still feel a lot of stigma around, and it's one of those things that's often underreported. Yeah. And it's been really good talking to lots of different organisations and charities and experts who are just so open with how they've been talking about these issues, and it's made me think about stuff like this in a very different way as well. Yeah,
it's really been normalised, and I feel like it's so important when at the MS Trust conference, which is all about educating health professionals, to have these experts talk about things, to really normalize them, to then pass that information on to the MS health professionals, that then when they talk to people with MS, can just talk about it in a normal fashion and just make sure, like our expert said, everybody poos.
That's it. Yeah. Everyone does it, don't they? So.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah, for sure. So people who live with MS, they might live with either constipation, which is people having problems emptying their bowels, or also people might live with incontinence as well. So that's the lack of control over when you're going to open your bowels and leading to accidents. And although, it's not uncommon for people who live with MS to experience both of those symptoms at times. And also, you might also have diarrhea or loose bowel movements as well, which can be linked to MS too.
But it's one of those things that's less often, isn't it? So
that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Before we start, we should probably say that if any sort of bowel issues that are listed below, I'm going to read the list here. It might be time to contact the health professionals and look for support. And this can be things like you notice changes in your bowel habits, such as you're going to the toilet more than before. Your stools have changed. They might be harder, softer, or change color. We might link to a thing. The health professionals like to talk about something called a poo chart. I know my son, he had problems with constipation. He was looking at these things and he was telling everybody that he was making smooth sausages. They get very descriptive. Children like talking about these things, don't they? They don't have the same issues as adults.
I know, yeah.
But it was, a good way for him to be able to describe to the nurse that was talking to him what was going on. So, and other problems can be that you have to rush to the toilet and that you have no control when your bowels open, or you leak feces or you pass wind without being aware of it. But one thing to really kind of think about here is that if you have blood in your poo or prolonged diarrhea, constipation or unexplained weight loss, that you do need to go and speak to your GP straight away for an assessment. It's important to not ignore these symptoms, as they can be signs of bowel cancer. Not everything is linked to MS, is it?
That's right, Helena. Yeah, so important, isn't it? And if you're seeing any of those red flags, make sure you talk to a professional straight away. In terms of bowel issues, we know from lots of surveys that we've done and also talking to health professionals too, is that they're really underreported, aren't they? They're not talked about as much as maybe they should be. And that comes with some risks in itself, doesn't it? Yeah. So if you are experiencing some of these things that we've talked about and you're feeling a little bit embarrassed and you're not sure, just go and see that health professional. That's what MS nurses are trained in. There's not going to be a situation where you have a conversation about bowel issues with your MS nurse and they think, I've never heard of this before.
No.
Or, you're definitely not the first one. The statistics are there that it's really common.
Yeah.
People are not talking about it. And actually, as we'll talk about later on in our interview, there's lots of ways that you can treat it or manage it that are, that aren't super difficult.
Yeah.
So it can be a case of actually getting yourself to see that person and moving forwards with a plan that's going to suit you.
Yeah, definitely. So we've been mentioning that we had some guests. So these are people who's actually speaking at our conference. And it's Noreen and Concetta, who Nick had the pleasure of talking to. I was standing behind and listening, so I've heard it. It was very interesting. So I guess without further ado, shall we just listen to it?
Yeah, definitely. Let's jump in again. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. So we are filming at our MS Trust conference today, and we're very happy to be joined by two bowel specialists. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we get going, I was wondering if you could just introduce yourselves for people listening. So if we could start with yourself, Noreen.
Hi Nick, thanks for asking me to be part of this today. My name's Noreen Barker. I'm the consultant nurse for MS at the National Hospital for Neurology at Queen's Square. I've been an MS nurse for 16 years, but my background is bladder and bowel. I was a bladder and bowel CNS for many years before that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And hello, Concetta.
And hi, thank you for inviting as well. So I'm a gut nurse and I come from the UCLH Trust, but working in the GI physiology. So I look after patients that have dysregulation on the brain-gut axis, but also a lot of bowel care and energenic bowel and bladder.
Amazing. Well, we're really happy that you're joining us today, as I say, taking time out of the conference as well to talk to us. So thank you so much. So I guess the first question from us is, what are some common bowel issues that happen for people living with MS?
I think quite often it can be something as simple as having to rush to the toilet more often than you did before, urgency, so more frequency, more urgency, constipation can be the other thing as well, or quite often a mixture of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And Concetta,
if I can add on
yeah.
it, because
Yeah,
I think it's
it.
very important. Often when people say constipation, it's just a general term, so we need to break down what they mean for it. So it could be feeling incomplete, empty, having this sense of bloating, or not be able to go regularly as well as they used to go in the past before MS, or even symptoms like feeling a little bit nauseous or not really. So constipation is a general term, and it's also the fear of the symptoms of incontinence, as alongside what you say, the urgency and incontinence.
I mean, quite often I've talked to people about, how well is your bowel working? How often are you going? What was your bowel pattern like before? Because I think there's quite a big misconception out there of what is constipation. And also, fear about the fact that I've got MS and now suddenly everything's going to go wrong. If somebody's got a lifelong history of, a certain bowel habit, the fact that they've got MS doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to change straight away. But also, if somebody's got quite a lifelong habit of problems, you sometimes have to think about how much, what's the level that they're going to improve to. Sometimes people have, they're worrying, or they're trying to reach a perfect pattern, when actually it's just finding a pattern that works for them and makes them feel comfortable. Yeah,
or perhaps there is this misconception about what is normal in bowel, because it changes from one person to another. So what normal for my bowel care routine or for my bowel habit is normal for you without MS already in place. But yeah, we see people that they worry about the bowel when the MS arrives, but also, often MS is involving women, is very affecting women, and women have been having a lot of other issues like children or pregnancy, which will affect the bowel with age as well, inevitably. So there is any change of pelvics in the pelvic area could affect the bowel. So it's not only MS, so it's said correctly.
Yeah,
I agree
absolutely.
with what you're saying.
I think quite often people are more comfortable to talk about their bladder symptoms. They're a little bit more reluctant to talk about the bowels. Classically, it's something that somebody will bring up right at the end of a consultation and sort of like throw it away as a throwaway comment as they're leaving. I think over the last 20 years or so, we're more comfortable talking about certain things. You know, if you think about, there's adverts out there for, you know, incontinence knickers for little leaks, and yet we're still embarrassed to talk about our bowel habits when, you know, we all pee and we all poo.
Yeah, absolutely. That's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's the thing that, you know, people are worried about when you talk about, say, bowel problems. They automatically think that you're just talking about if you have accidents, when actually it's you know, are you having to spend a disproportionate amount of time on managing your bowels? Is it suddenly ruling your life? Are you not able to leave the house until you've opened your bowels? Are you frightened to go out far?
Yeah, it's our second brain, the bowel. So in a way, it can take over if you allowed it. So early management is kind of important, or like share your worries is important to not feed that worries.
Yeah,
as you say.
Absolutely. And I think worry as well and anxiety can make symptoms seem so much worse as well.
I guess when I was just listening to you both there, just talking very openly about bowel problems, and talking about the stigma that's out there. If anyone's listening to this and they're thinking, I don't want to talk about that with my health professional, but, you know, or maybe I might mention it, I might not. I don't want to. I'm embarrassed. What would you say to them?
I always say to people when I meet them at new diagnosis is there's nothing that you can't talk to us about. You know, whether or not, you know, you've got an MS nurse that works on their own, or you're seeing somebody that works as part of a big team, you know, there's very little that people, you know, there is literally nothing that people can't talk to us about. So I would say, don't be embarrassed, talk about it. Even if it's something that is just something slight that's happening at the moment, the quicker that we can pick up on what's happening, sometimes the more straightforward the treatment options are. You know, it might be something as simple as adjusting your diet or adjusting your routine or, you know, drinking a bit more fluid. It doesn't have to be, you know, a big change.
I hear you, yeah.
And talking helps to normalize things, anything, included the challenging one, from the most difficult to the easiest one. So, yeah, it's a choice, but we do invite people to talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've seen it all. It's not scary. You know, you're there to help. You know, there's nothing that anyone can say that will, you know.
Yeah, and I think in most MS nurse clinics, you know, you might be able to give somebody really simple advice whilst you decide whether or not you do need to refer them on to see somebody else. You know, you can normalise the situation. You know, we can signpost to really good information, such as, you know, the pages on the MS Trust website, or you know, the fantastic bowel booklet. You know, I think it's about reassuring people that, you know, that symptoms can be improved, and that it's much better to talk about it sooner rather than leave it for longer and suffer in silence. There's no need to suffer in silence.
Yeah, because we need to figure out what is important for them, because otherwise we can't mind read. So it's important.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, you're not mind readers,
No.
and actually it could be something that's, you know, as you're saying, preventing someone from leaving the house, or, you know, going to activities or seeing their friends and their family. And actually, if there is support there and available, it's so important to talk about it, isn't it? So I think that's such a good message. But coming back to kind of the root of this, so what causes the bowel problems in MS?
Oh, they can be caused by many reasons. I mean, partly it can be because suddenly the bowel is not working as effectively as it did in the past. It can be irritated by, you know, medications that people are on for their MS, such as certain of the disease-modifying treatments might slightly upset somebody's bowel. It could be medication that people are taking for, bladder symptoms, such as, the anti-muscarinics, or medications that they're taking for neuropathic pain that can make you a little bit constipated. It can be, neurogenic issues with the bowel that's slowing gut transition or affecting how well the sphincter works. The message is going back and forward. It can be many-folded, but as Concetta said earlier, sometimes people can get constipated because maybe they've had a few instances of where they've had accidents with the bowel, and therefore it is a choice to sort of, avoid certain foods or to take medications that would make them maybe that little bit more constipated to avoid having accidents. So it's sort of manyfold.
Yeah, don't drink, don't eat. Yeah, so
don't drink, don't eat. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of people skip meals to come in clinic, which is not what really we want. So we want to offer a service, but actually we're not really helping. I think it's complex going to toilet. It's like we've been studying it. I'm very lucky to be in a unit which is very sensitive to this topic. So mainly there's the central part of the brain, there's the spine, there's the muscles, there's how the pelvic floor works. So many elements. And I think if we put all together, that elements all together with all the medication that the people need to take, and all the other conditions that people have, people get older and older. We all get older, so we will have other conditions alongside the MS. So there are many opioids perhaps affect your bowel a lot. So there's many elements.
And mobility. If you're less mobile, then the gut mobility is going to be slower. You add into that, maybe fatigue is affecting your ability to have a good balanced healthy diet if you're relying on foods that are easy to make, or you're relying on somebody else. And I think there's so many different factors, but I think that's part of not being afraid to talk about it. Is then it's the role of us as healthcare professionals to try and unpick what's happening, and then that helps us to make a good treatment plan.
And I think what is important is that not leave people by themselves on this, because our mind tendentially looks for connection and reason why this happened and what did I do, what did I change, and that is a natural reaction that people have in front of a problem. But what is the healthcare profession is looking more at the scientific point of view and say, okay, there is mainly this broad area that could affect your mood, the way in which your MS is affecting your spine or your brain or your muscles, and tackle that little element that we can tackle with medication or with treatment or with mood or support. So we have separate role, professional and patient, but I think we need to work together on this, especially because bowel is not a straightforward thing. It is involving many elements, and that's where it becomes a little more complex to challenge if you leave it alone. But we need to put it together, and also with other situations like bladder issues.
It's a complex picture by the sounds of things, so it must be.
But the complexity is also helpful to find a solution. So we like to kind of describe the complexity, but not to scare people, but to say it depends what is your problem. So when I think when Noreen refers some patients that are very more, we know that we need to break down the issue and tackle where it's possible. So the complexity doesn't mean like no solution. It means like, we have lots of options as well. And luckily we are also studying this. So so it can be managed.
This is possibly a difficult question to talk about after you've just said about how much of a complex picture it can be. But if anyone's listening to this who lives with MS and has sort of heard about bowel issues and read about them, is there anything that they can do to prevent them later on in life?
I think having a healthy lifestyle, and I think there are some things in MS that you can't prevent. Does that make sense? But I think simple things like having a good, balanced, healthy diet, keeping as active as you can, having a good fluid intake, and I think building up a good rapport with your healthcare professionals that gives you the confidence to be able to talk about things when there's a problem. You know, there's a big part of the relationship with your healthcare professionals to be able to feel comfortable. Not many people are going to walk in the first time that they meet you and say, oh, hey, guess what? I've got a bowel problem. They're probably going to wait a little while. And I think as healthcare professionals, we need to pick up as well that actually when people do raise it, it's probably been going on for a significant amount of time before somebody's actually going to mention it to you.
Right, yeah, having that confidence to bring it up. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you can certainly prevent that vicious circle where sometimes you end up because you want to really solve the problem, and you do find some strategies which is they're not helpful, but you don't know that until when you don't confront your problem with someone else. And I think we looked at many people, and healthcare professionals are not the first point of reference for bowel issue.
No.
There is often like we are like the fifth of the fourth along the line. So yes, there is a difficulties on opening up about bowels, and we hope that the more we talk about this, the better we become to listen and
I think
to
the more we
address
talk,
the problem.
the more we talk about it, the more we normalise things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so important, isn't it? So important.
Yeah.
And then if you know someone does come to you and they are having bowel issues, how are they often treated?
Well, I think firstly it's trying to find out what is the problem. Asking people to sort of describe what symptoms they're having. How frequently are they opening their bowels? When they do, what's the consistency? Nurses love something called the Bristol stool chart, which basically is a lovely chart with lots of pictures of, what poo could look like. But it's really helpful to give an idea of, what somebody's pattern is. And then once you've got an idea of that and you've got an idea of how they're feeling about it, then looking at the simple things like, okay, so tell me how often you're going, tell me how easy or how difficult it is. Then thinking about things like diet, fluid intake, how active somebody is, and then really about, okay, so how are you managing this at the moment? Because as Concetta said, quite often people will have tried to self-manage in their own way before maybe they'll raise it. And then that helps really, I suppose, us to work out, whether or not we can give really simple, sort of conservative advice, such as, diet and fluids or positioning on the toilet, or then whether or not we decide that we do need to refer somebody on. In the meantime, you can usually give people some, sensible advice to follow in the meantime, because, referrals and wait times in the NHS at the moment, if you're referred on to somebody, you might be waiting, probably weeks or if not months to be able to see somebody. So you can make some really sensible advice in the meantime. And most, I would say all MS nurses are going to be able to give people the basics of the advice, or at least signpost to good sources of information.
Yeah, so when they come in clinic, I think they already seen tried a few of the conservative advice. So I think there are more and more nurses that work with biofeedback, something called, which is simply like physiotherapy for your bowel. You can do in many ways. So there is more an approach to the cognitive side and the one from the physical retraining side. So it depends. The cognitive side is talking about routine, talking about like what all the element that could affect the bowel. The physical side is more the biofeedback. And there is different treatment and tests that the doctor offer or the nurses offer often. But it's not, the key things is having a good assessment in clinic with someone. Because they open up possibilities.
Yeah, and quite often, the start of the assessment is maybe keeping a bowel diary. keeping a diary of how often you're going, when you go, what's it like, is it easy to go, is it difficult to go. And, you know, certainly as a bladder and bowel nurse, I knew the charts that were, or the diaries that were kept as people went, because they were the ones that were a bit raggedy. The paper was raggedy around the edges. It had been folded up and put in pockets and taken out. The ones that look too pristine are somebody racking their brain of what's happened over a couple of days. But I think it's, I think also sort of conservative methods, sometimes it can be, making use of the gastrocolic reflex, so making use of the body's own natural rhythm, that a really good time to sit on the toilet to have your bowels open is 20 minutes or so after you've had something to eat or drink. So whether or not that's encouraging a change of routine, today we all lead really busy lives, and if you're getting up, you're getting your kids sorted, you're eating your breakfast, and then you're rushing out the door, then the minute you want to go is the minute that you're on the train where there's no toilet, and then people are panicking. Or conversely, people are not eating because they're trying to get somewhere before they have something to eat in case that happens. So it's sometimes it's just encouraging people, giving people the security or their confidence that they can tweak their routine.
Yeah, diary are important. I agree with you. To also be, I have patients that have a lot of constipation. They're not sure when they last went to the toilet. But it's not everything. The diary is more about what is bother you, and be kind of open to talk about it.
Are there any medications that someone might be taking that are not for bowel but might have that impact on bowel issues?
I think there's lots of medications that can have an impact on somebody's bowel. So whether or not that's some of the disease-modifying treatments, whether or not that is medications for pain or spasticity, or antidepressants can have an effect on bowels. Or it can be things that. There are certain disease-modifying treatments that can upset the bowel. But I think quite often before somebody's raised it, they might have tried over-the-counter medications such as, Senna or Movicol or things like that, to have tried to manage their bowels before they would even mention that there's a problem.
Yeah, just because your neighbor has some medication and you try it out, which is fair enough, is okay, safe. There's nothing. So people are often worried that they've been doing some damage to the bowel because they've been trying this. So again, it's okay if you speak with an healthcare professional. They point you out in the starting what is the minimum, the initial level appropriate for you. If it's incomplete, empty, just suppository will do, and they don't have to go through your health system, through your gut, but you can just use it through the back passage, which is fine and is not addictive. There is a lot of misconception about bowel medication as well, that you become addicted, that your bowel don't work anymore, that you do some harm to yourself. And this, I found it interesting because we don't think about this when we use other medication, but with the bowel we're very protective as well. And so
I think a lot of people use other sort of complementary medicines now, or they'll try other things. So I think certainly over the last 20 years or so, there's more people trying things like flax seeds or linseeds in their diet, or aloe vera, or...
But they're fine. I mean, we don't have much evidence on diet. It's really hard to find because it's difficult to gather. But it's okay if it works for you. But I would say don't try one thing at a time for a small amount of time, and be firm with the outcome. I think some food supplements that are available, sometimes they could be useful, but double check with your clinicians, I think, is always the good key.
That sounds like really good advice. So, not trying everything all at once, and seeing what works for you, and having,
and it takes sometimes it can take some time to readjust a bowel pattern as well.
Yeah,
it's
thank you
not
for saying
expecting
that.
for things to work overnight. I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing. People will try something and
And
because
they
it doesn't
expect an
work
immediate
tomorrow, they
reaction.
expect an immediate reaction.
Yeah.
So, is there any equipment that people might be able to use from the NHS to help them?
Well, I think I think if there's an intractable problem, then pads are available from local bladder and bowel services. I would say probably over the last 15 years or so, I think the most popular thing, can be the different kits that are out there for transanal irrigation. So that's very simply, after an assessment by an appropriate healthcare professional, it's equipment that's basically using water to stimulate the bowel.
Yep.
So that can either be quite a complicated kit that's, got digital controls, or it can be something really simple as, just sort of like a bulb
To wash out the rectum.
to wash out the rectum. And I think those are available on prescription.
Yep.
But I think the really important thing is being able to talk about the symptoms so somebody can refer you on appropriately, and that's not necessarily something that somebody would go to straight away. It would probably be conservative methods first, and then other options after that, isn't it?
Yeah, we are really lucky in England because there are many companies that produce product, and so it's important that you approach this again as one of the many elements that could help with your bowel care. So by itself is not going to solve all the problem, and again you need like a period of training for your bowel to get used to it.
So percutaneous tibial nerve stimulation, it's basically stimulating the tibial nerve. It looks a little bit like a TENS machine.
Yeah.
That it's
Or an acupuncture needle.
on an acupuncture needle that help, and it's usually a course of treatment. So people would be seen in an outpatient setting. They'd have a trial session. So I think there's anal inserts in there.
Yep. That can help with passive leakage or small quantity of incontinence.
Wow. So there are options out there for people, and I guess it comes back to what you were saying, about being very open with your healthcare professional and looking at all the options and the lifestyle and everything that's going on for that person, and making the right decisions for them based on where they are, I guess. So yeah, thank you. It was really interesting to hear about some of that. So I get linked to some of those things actually. So have you got any tips for anyone who is worried about getting out and about?
I think trying to establish a good bowel routine is probably the first thing that you can do. That is thinking about, the timing of when you're eating, and I normally encourage people to have breakfast, to have have a warm drink, have something to eat, try and get your bowel to work before you go out. And I think a lot of people will sort of rely on that to be able to give themselves the confidence that they've had their bowels open, and therefore they can go out and about without worrying about being caught short. I think there's lots of you can think about the practical things when out and about. There is something called the Great British Toilet Map, which I think is referred to in the booklet, which tells you where the local toilets are to you. Things like having a radar key.
A radar key, or even simple a card to start the conversation, because often is invisible.
So there is either through the
Bowel and
Bladder and Bowel
Society.
UK, they've got a Just Can't Wait.
Yeah.
That you can either purchase a card from them, or you can download an app onto your phone that's got a Just Can't Wait. You can keep it in your smart wallet on your smartphone. Your wallet on your smartphone even, that you can show. I think the MS Society have got a Just Can't Wait card as well that you can apply for, that you can contact them for. I think the radar key you can buy from online. You can either buy from, there's not much that you can't buy on Amazon, which are their really chunky keys that unlock every accessible toilet out and about. But yes, if you are receiving products for, like say for example, intermittent catheters or catheter supplies, a lot of the home delivery companies, such as say Charter or Fittleworth, will give you a free radar key. But they cost they're about £5, £5 to £7 to buy.
Yeah.
And I think they're worth having. And I think accessible toilets and space to be able to access easily, I think, is becoming better than it was in the past, which is great. And I think not being afraid to ask if you're somewhere, if you can use,
Yeah, because
I
in
think that's a
the
really
women
important
there is
thing to
always
do.
a queue in the toilet, so maybe don't be worried to break that kind of ask people to let you go. They have some
As you said, it
urgency.
is an invisible symptom. People can't see that you would have that symptom. I think there's also something called the daisy lanyard that's become really popular in recent years, and you can either buy the daisy lanyard, which indicates that you've got an invisible symptom of some kind. There are little cards that attach to that, but I don't know if I just say to people, just buy the daisy lanyard. That gives people some kind of an indication that you might have a health condition that means that you need better access. And I think you see a lot of people out and about in London on the Underground wearing these daisy lanyards now than you did before.
Yeah, so important, isn't it? And actually, it's, as going back to what you were saying about just, having that confidence and, just having that card, we'll make sure we link to all of those resources as well. It's just having that card that actually, I need help at this point, I need to be able to get to the front of this queue. That's really, really helpful. And I'm really glad to hear that there's lots of strategies and lots of places online where you can get that support as well, and making things more accessible for everyone. It's so important, isn't it? So we just had just last couple of questions, if that's okay, and then we will let you go. But these are questions that we asked the MS community. We sort of put a call out and said, look, we're interviewing some experts. Do you have anything that you'd like to ask? So first one that someone's, and these are all anonymous, by the way, just to make sure. So someone's asked, can MS bowel issues show up before you have a diagnosis of MS?
That's a really good question. I think difficult to say. I wouldn't necessarily say that pre-existing bowel problems is an indicator that somebody's going to have MS in their lifetime. I think we know that there is this period of time called the prodrome, where certain symptoms can pop up that then in the then in hindsight that you can look back and think, I wonder if that was sort of symptoms that have popped up. So quite commonly at new diagnosis, people might say, quite often they're told that they've got IBS. If they've got fluctuating constipation or conversely, urgency and loose bowel movements. But I think we've got to be really careful that it would be very easy to blame everything on the MS. Yeah. And undoubtedly there will be people out there who have got irritable bowel syndrome and MS. I mean, I think we've got a better understanding now that bladder and bowel problems can come up much sooner in somebody's MS than maybe we first appreciated. I think as healthcare professionals we used to talk about we know that sort of between 70 and 80% of people might have symptoms at some time in their MS, but we maybe always assumed that it came in later, and actually there's been probably newer research that would say that that symptoms can pop up far sooner. I think when you link that into the fact that quite often people have had symptoms for a long time before they talk about it, that sort of fits in with that, doesn't it? So I think it's, if I think probably the best message we can give is, if you notice things are happening, then talk about it, because, sometimes what we're going to suggest can probably be much simpler the earlier that we catch things.
Yeah. I think you avoid that kind of vicious circle where you end up on trying and error, because in life everything is try and error. And it's always up to you, but at the same time, speaking with someone that can help is our duty as a clinician be available for that. So
I think also we can slip into that thing that quite often people will contact, say the advice service at Queen Square, and they'll talk about symptoms that, as an MS nurse and an ex-bladder and bowel nurse, that I'll think, I'm not sure that is your MS. And I think it's really easy for everything, once somebody's got MS, everything to be blamed on it. So I think it's making sure that people are aware of the red flags. Yeah. So, if you do have blood in your stools when you open your bowels, or you have mucus, you need to go to your GP and talk about it. The fact that you've got MS does not preclude other things from happening in your lifetime. And I think certainly all the great stuff that was done over the last couple of years with with Bowel Babe, I think we've got to be really, careful that you don't blame everything on somebody's MS.
Definitely, yeah. Or if you're losing weight because of your bowel issue, or if you can't eat, that's our red flags. And so, I totally agree.
That's really good advice, yeah. So if you've got any of those really worrying symptoms, make sure you talk to a professional about it. Yeah, thank you. And then last question would be that someone's written in is, and I imagine this again might not be the easiest question to answer, but is there a right time to take medication for constipation? So should it be like before bedtime, or should it be first thing in the morning?
It's difficult because it depends what type of medication we are talking, but at night when you go to sleep, usually the bowel slow down. There's a study that explain that. And so if you take it at night and you have your bowel care routine in the morning, that could help. But the key thing is finding your routine, so what works for you. It's putting together all the tips that we know will work, so every time you eat or drink, you produce a gastrocolic reflex. So we say to people that is the most likely time when you go to toilet. So regarding medication, it has to be within that kind of time frame to put that all together. So perhaps going to sleep, the medication will work within 6-8 hours. And when you wake up, you have a good breakfast, and perhaps you have a good bowel movement. Or if it doesn't happen, the bowel movement is still fine, but you're giving your bowel a sort of routine. So maybe the night. But depends what medication you're talking. Some medication doesn't matter. Like prucalopride is like you can take it at any time of the day. I think more the stimulant medications, sometimes people prefer to take it at night.
So stimulant medications being things like Senna, Dulcolax. Yeah,
or even
people to take before.
Even medication like softeners medication. So the key things will be combining the treatment that you are having. If it's one-off, you can take it the night before going to sleep. But if it's like you need to break it during the day because you need to take it more than one dose, you can add it after a meal. There is no right or wrong. It depends about your bowel care routine that you want to establish, and that would be nice to chat with your. But I hope that the question doesn't lead to the worry of being dependent by that medication, because after question can have the second question. So you don't get dependent, or you don't buy bowel medication.
I think probably for if people have got, say, looser bowel movements, then quite often people might use something like, say, a very low dose of loperamide.
Yep, and that works very quickly, within half an hour.
Quickly, so if you were trying to go out and about, maybe you could try that. And I certainly over the years, a lot of people that would take loperamide solution liquid.
It's very helpful
because you can titrate it better. Can't you?
It's not always available on the market, so sometimes we advise people to have the melt dose, which is like you can dissolve it and take a little bit less. So again, that's a try and error, and it lasts 6-8 hours, so you can stop. You can take it more than once during the day according to your stool consistency. We're not too obsessed as a bowel nurse about the stool consistency, but we know it's an important indication sometimes to titrate the medication, and you can take it if you need to go out to keep you a bit more safe, or if your bowel movement are too loose. So it's a good medication, loperamide. It's quite safe.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for today. Packed full of information and tips and so many different strategies that people are going to be able to come away from this interview and use. So thank you so much, Sam. Hope it was helpful for everyone listening. Thank you, Noreen, and thank you, Concetta.
Thanks for asking us to talk to you today.
Yeah, pleasure.
Amazing. And we'll let you get back to the conference now. So
Okay,
thank you.
thank
Bye then. Thank you.
Now, if this was a commercial podcast, this is where there would be an ad break. You know this by now, that we don't do those things. So this is the time for us to talk about some of the MS Trust resources that we have.
Yeah, definitely. And a great place to start, Helena, is our website. So that's mstrust.org.uk. And on there, we've got lots of information about bowel issues, bladder issues. So what you can do is you can head to the A to Z and have a look for bowel under there. And we've also recently updated one of our publications as well. So it's a guide for people living with MS called Managing Your Bowel. And you can download it for free, okay, if you want to have a digital copy, or if you'd rather have a physical copy to have around the house, you can order one as well. And again, they're free of charge. So do have a look on there. And also, we've also got another book, which is Managing Your Bladder. So you'll see that one linked as well. Have a look in our show notes. We'll make sure that we link to all of these publications and pages too.
So interesting.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
I find, like we've said before, you know, people talking about this being a taboo subject. I don't know. I find, so when I was in my 20s, it would not have been a subject that I would have gone and wanted to talk to a health professional, I don't think. But like, there's certain things like having children, like I mentioned at the start, you know, my son will go around and talk about his poos or do this and that, the other, so you can't avoid it really. I also belong to the sort of running community, and runners love to talk about poo for some reason. It's a bit of a mystery. I did not know before I joined the running community. But it just makes it easier and normalizes things. And I feel like, you know, now we've listened to a few things here at MS Trust Conference, and we listened to Noreen and Concetta talk, and you just feel like it really doesn't need to be an issue to talk about it. It's so important. And it's really sad to know that what they were talking about, that some people kind of try and manage things by themselves, and then they worry that they've done something wrong. You know, they were saying things like, oh, they take like Senna or something like that, and then suddenly think, oh, I'm doing damage to myself, and I'm doing these things. Because instead of going to talk to a health professional, you might be, it sounds a bit weird, but like experimenting on yourself in private because you're too ashamed to talk about it. Then actually it would have been better to just go there straight away and sort of say, I'm constipated, what can I do about it? Because sometimes it was as simple as just like, oh, well, you need to maybe drink more water, or you need to think about what you're eating. Are you sitting the correct way on the toilet, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that stuck out to me was, as well as when they were talking about people who are skipping meals because they're so worried about getting out and about. And actually that's another way that people are trying to self-manage. Yeah. And, you know, having potentially a detrimental effect on their day-to-day life. Yeah. You know, imagine that, you know, not leaving the house because, you know, not leaving the house unless you've made sure you haven't had anything to eat. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're out and about and you haven't, you know, got that energy and you're dealing with fatigue anyway, potentially, you know, and other symptoms. So, I think another key message was just talk about it. Yeah. You know, just bring it up with your health professional. Just talk about it. Yeah.
And I also like the way, when we talk about things like doing, I don't know, when you go to an appointment with a bladder and bowel clinic, for instance, you have to do these diaries and like fill in things. Because normally you don't think about so much. Like if I would go down the street and ask 5 people, when do you poo? I mean, people would probably run away from me first if I would go and ask them. But people would probably not go, well, I do it every day at 7 o'clock. You know, they wouldn't really necessarily know. But once you start writing down and you're kind of seeing, oh, there is a pattern here, then if you are experiencing problems and things like that, you can maybe go, well, actually, maybe it's because of this or that, you know. Like I said, being a runner, you don't want to feel the urge to go to the toilet when you're out running, so you try to make sure that that happens beforehand. And then there are some tricks to do that. So you like they said about having your breakfast, you know, for me, it's the black coffee and some porridge. And then the stomach hopefully gets started on that. And then once you know that you've gone, you can go out for a run. And so it's all about planning, but actually doing those diaries and these kind of preparations can really make a difference for your life in the long run, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just going to go towards helping you to manage it effectively.
Yeah.
And also having that guidance from a professional as well. So you're not having that guesswork that you were talking about with the, you know, medication over the counter and skipping meals and all that type of thing. And yeah, I think, you know, what I really took away from it was that people are not talking about these things enough.
Yeah.
You know, and we still feel it, don't we, in our society, that there's a stigma around bowel issues. And actually, what they were saying was there are lifestyle changes that you can make, there are medications, there are treatments, like there's lots of things that you can do to address them. And actually being able to have those conversations and make those changes could bring on, you know, a lot better lifestyle, you know, independence and being able to do the things that you've been missing out on because of these issues. There's help available.
Yeah, I found, so this is an interesting thing, I think. The first ever podcast that we did, and this was a long time before you started, this was, the first ever podcast we did was with Noreen, which was also about some bladder and bowel things. It's linked to in the show notes, you can listen to it. And I was sitting recording it. I was behind the camera at the time, and I had issues with like constipation for a long time, but never talked to my MS nurse about it, never said anything. And I was sitting there listening to what Noreen was saying, and I thought, I'm being an idiot. Why am I saying, telling everybody, you know, you should go and talk to your health professional, do it. I'm not doing it myself. Because I think maybe there is so much sort of, almost a little bit of shame around, oh, it might be my fault. Because if you do diet changes, you might fix it. But then they also made the very valid point that sometimes you can't, it's not fixable like that, because it is actually the MS that is causing the problem. And it's not your fault. There's nothing you could have done to prevent that if I don't drink loads and loads of water, I don't go to the toilet, but I still, with drinking water, still will have problems. So after the appointment, I would love to say that I went and called her the day after. It probably took me another year or something. It percolated in my mind for a while. And then talked to the MS nurse, got myself referred to a bladder and bowel specialist, and sat down and actually sort of explained what was going on, that my constipation is really bad. So I started using an irrigation system. And I know some people get really scared about these things. It's like, oh, what's going on? What's, putting things up your bottom or what have you. But actually, you're watching all these shows of, people going on, spas and things and doing colonic irrigations. Yeah. So it's not as scary as it may sound. And had a lovely person come in and sort of show me all the equipment, train me up on how to use it. And it took a little while, but it really changed my life, and it's made a huge, big difference. And it's quite a simple step. The hardest bit is actually going there and making that appointment, talking in the first place. So I feel like if you are like me when you're listening to this, and it might take you a while, like I said, it might percolate for a bit, but just don't not talk about it. Go there, go and talk to them, because there might be something there for you to help, and I think that can make all the difference.
Yeah, for sure. It was really interesting what you were saying about that being the most difficult part of the process for you in your situation,
I think
right?
So.
Yeah.
Because with all the details and things, you make it up in your head. You just think, oh, that's going to be disgusting, or that's going to be weird, or it must be painful, and things like that. But, having had 2 children, you change a lot of nappies and things. There are things that you can deal with that can be harder and more difficult. So for me, I think that actually it's that you make a mental barrier of things sometimes. And I think that can be really, really difficult. I do know they were mentioning things like anal plugs and stuff, and I do remember hearing this fantastic quote from, I think it was from an MS nurse, who said like one of her patients sent her a message saying she stopped running because she was too worried about leaking while she was running, because she struggled with bowel problems, and she started running with one of these plugs, and now can run without any problems, without worrying or anything, and she can go back into doing something that she loved doing. And I think that's the thing. If you have to modify your life so much because of these issues, when there is actually things out there to help you deal with it, it's really important to don't be the barrier yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And don't suffer in silence, right? And if it's stopping you from doing the things that you love doing, have those conversations, open up. And like we keep saying, these people are trained in having these conversations. Okay, so like, it must be scary being in that situation that you were in and thinking, how do I get over this hurdle? And, what if it was my fault? All these things that you were saying, maybe I can manage it myself and have that guessing game. And actually, there's people there who listen to this stuff all day, every day, and they come to training sessions and they talk about these things.
They want to learn more about it. They want to do it. It's not like they have to do it. They actually, that's their choice. They become bowel specialists because they find it interesting and they want to work within that field. Yeah,
and I think Noreen was saying, she was like, we want you to tell us. We want you to tell us about it. And also I think we've heard this a couple of times over conference as well, as like, if you're feeling really, really underconfident about something, you can always write it on a note and just pass it to them.
It's very true, because if you, for instance, if you're in email conversations with your nurse, I quite often, if I have a new symptom or something like that, will write an email. So if you feel more confident doing that, you could just write an email and say, this is some issues, and then they might call you up, or they might just send you an email saying, okay, we refer you to a specialist. So, nobody's going to laugh at you, or nobody's going to say, oh, that's disgusting. I mean, that's... So, as we've spoken about both in this podcast and the previous one, these are maybe some topics that people can find a bit embarrassing. And there's a lot of other topics within the world of MS that can feel embarrassing. Bladder and bowel are two issues, but there could be sexual problems. But it can also be things like, you come out at work with having MS, you telling your friends and family, or, having cognition issues. So taboo subjects can really differ from person to person. What's something that's a taboo for me might not be a taboo for you. So for MS Awareness Week this year, which is the 22nd to 28th of April, we've teamed up with a bunch of other MS charities. We did this last year, and that was great. And our focus will be on breaking the stigma of embarrassing or so-called taboo subjects and get talking about this. So we just wanted to tell you, so watch this space, because there will be more content coming on these sort of topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm really looking forward to that project, Helena. And, we had such an amazing, and we really got people talking last year about mental health and MS. And I think these kind of more sensitive topics, sexual dysfunction, bowel issues, that a lot of people who are living with MS, as we've been talking about, are underreporting and not having these conversations. And there's not that awareness in the wider community, is there? No. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, this should be really interesting. And I feel, in some communities, people don't talk about having MS at all. There might be ethnic communities and things like that you just don't mention it. So taboo is it's a word that we might associate straight away, go down to sex or something like that, but actually it can be a lot of different things. So we have a lot to cover, but it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you've got a question about any of those sensitive topics or any other aspect of life with MS, you can always get in contact with our helpline team. So they're available from Monday to Friday, and that's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can call them on 0800 032 3839. If you do call outside of those hours, you can always leave a message and we'll make sure that we do get back to you. If you're someone who would rather not have a phone conversation with someone, you can drop them an email as well, and that's ask@mstrust.org.uk.
And speaking to you, people who might not be phone people, you can also find us on social media. So you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, X, TikTok, and Instagram, or LinkedIn if you happen to be in that sphere. And you can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or any place that you would normally find your podcasts. We do like it when you give us a review.
Absolutely.
Any feedback is always welcome. We would like to know. Maybe you can tell us about what you think is a taboo subject. What's embarrassing for you? What would you like to see us talk more about? Doesn't have to be embarrassing things, but what things would you like to hear more about in the podcast? So if you're listening to this and you're feeling a bit generous, go and give us a review. we love to hear your feedback.
Awesome. Well, Helena, it's always a pleasure talking to you. So we better get back to conference. So yeah. Thank you. We'll see you later.